The wind screamed like a beast through the trees, clawing at the log walls of Talon Stone Tree's cabin. Snow came sideways, a white curtain tearing across the mouth of the valley, swallowing every tree, every path, every sound. This storm didn't whisper of danger, it howled it. It was the kind of cold that cracked bones and split bark, the kind that could bury a man without leaving a single footprint. Talon moved with practiced silence, his breath fogging the window as he watched the dark blur of pines vanish beneath the storm. He wasn't afraid of blizzards. The mountain had tried to kill him before and failed, but something tonight was off wrong in a way he couldn't name. Then came the gunshot. Sharp. Close. He froze. One heartbeat. Two. The second shot cracked louder than the first. Not warning fire. Not someone hunting elk. No, this was the sound of panic. Of blood. He pulled his buffalo hide coat from the wall hook, slid his long knife into the belt at his hip, and took down his Hawken rifle. The fire in the hearth spat sparks behind him as he stepped out into the storm, the door slamming shut with the full weight of the wind. He pushed through knee-deep snow, the cold biting into his skin like teeth. Each breath stung. Every step was blind. He moved by memory 50 yards west to the small barn where the last of his goats and hens were holed up. He'd locked the place up tight before the storm, but something was wrong. A hunch rooted in his gut like a thorn. The barn loomed ahead, dark against the swirling snow. One of the doors stood ajar, rocking back and forth on its hinges, creaking like a coffin lid. He approached slowly, rifle up, breath held. A flicker of light from inside, weak orange and desperate. And then a voice. High, raw, choked by fear. You open that door, and I swear I'll shoot you dead before you take a single step. Talon paused. Not a man's voice. A woman's. Southern drawl cracked and shaking. He shifted slightly, adjusting his stance. Name's Talon Stone Tree, he said loud enough to be heard through the wind. This is my land, my barn, and unless you plan on bleeding out on my hay, you might want to lower that gun. Silence. Then a cough. A child's cough. Talon pushed the door open slowly with the barrel of his rifle. The scene inside hit him harder than the cold. A woman knelt in the far corner, slumped against a bale of hay, one arm limp at her side, her coat soaked dark with blood. Her other hand held a small pistol, barely steady, aimed straight at his chest. 7 children huddled around her like pups in a den. None older than 13. One was barefoot. Another wore a dress made for summer. Their eyes were sunken cheeks, hollow skin, too pale for anyone still breathing. And they were all staring at him like he was the devil himself. He dropped his rifle slowly, let it hit the straw with a thump. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. That's what he said too, the woman snapped. Her eyes were glassy with fever, but her grip on the pistol didn't waver. Who's he? My brother-in-law, she said. Malcolm Rowe. And he's coming. He's always coming. Talon took a slow step forward, raising his hands. You're bleeding out. The kids are freezing. I've got to fire food clean blankets. We can't stay. You can't leave either. Not in this storm. I'd rather die in here than let him touch them. The youngest child, no more than 3, let out a soft whimper. The woman's face crumpled. Talon saw his opening. He crossed the space in 3 strides and caught her as she collapsed, the pistol slipping from her hand. Her body was on fire with fever. Her lips were cracked. Her hair stuck to her cheeks in frozen strands. She smelled of blood and wood smoke, and something else, something feral. Fear. He glanced at the kids. What's your name, boy? He asked the one who looked oldest. Elon, the boy said. His voice was small but steady. "We can walk. Then help the little ones. Stay close. We've got to move fast." Talon shifted the woman in his arms, surprised by how light she was, bird-boned, half dead. Outside, the storm had thickened. Snow swirled so hard it felt alive, like it was trying to stop them. Each step was war. The path invisible. Ilan shouted behind him to keep the younger ones moving, his voice a lifeline in the white chaos. It felt like hours before they reached the cabin. He kicked the door open and stumbled inside, nearly dropping the woman in front of the hearth. The warmth hit like fire to frozen skin. He eased her onto the rug and turned to the children. "Inside. Shut that door." They obeyed. One by one, the children collapsed around the fire, too exhausted to speak. Talon knelt beside the woman. Her lips moved. He leaned close. "Clara," she whispered. He blinked. "Clara what, Whitestone?" Her eyes rolled back. She passed out cold. Talon checked her wound. Bullet in the shoulder. Deep. Crusted. Infected. He swore under his breath and stood. "Elan." The boy jumped. "Water's in the kettle. Bring rags. And the whiskey." "Yes, sir." The other children sat quietly watching with wide eyes. One started to cry, but Elan took her hand. Talon felt it then, not fear. Not yet. Responsibility. He wasn't just saving lives. He was inviting in a war. And somewhere out in that storm, a man named Malcolm Rowe was already on their trail. As Talon tended Clara's wound, the blizzard roared louder, rattling the cabin walls. Ellen stood guard at the door, hand on the pistol. Clara dropped. He looked at Talon. "He'll come," the boy said. Talon didn't flinch. "Then we'll be ready." The fever broke some time after midnight, but Clara Whitestone didn't wake peacefully. She thrashed on the floor in front of the fire, her breath coming in shallow gasps, sweat slicking her brow despite the cold outside. Talon Stonetree sat beside her knees, stiff from hours on the floor, one hand holding a damp cloth, the other resting lightly on the hunting knife at his belt, not for defense but for control. She'd nearly clawed through the bandages an hour ago, in a fit of delirium, crying out names he didn't recognize, words that didn't make sense. "Elan," she murmured now, voice thin as a thread. "He's here," Talon said quietly. "They all are. They're safe." Clara stirred but didn't open her eyes. Talon had done what he could, cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with boiled cloth, wrapped it tight, but there was infection in her blood, and he knew too well how fast that could spread. He had watched fever kill stronger folk for less. The children had finally fallen asleep, curled like pups near the hearth, bundled in spare blankets and fur throws. Elan, always on edge, sat upright against the cabin door, the small pistol resting in his lap. His eyes never fully closed. "You don't sleep much, do you?" Talon asked softly. Elan looked over, alert. "Somebody's got to be ready. You think he'll come tonight?" The boy's jaw clenched. "He always comes." Talon didn't press. The fire popped, sending up a soft shower of sparks. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin, shaking the shutters. "How long have you been running?" Talon asked. Ellen didn't answer right away. He glanced at the others, Peter, Emma, the twins, Marcus, all of them breathing slow and deep, finally warm for the first time in God knows how long. "Since we buried Samuel," he said. 3 weeks. Maybe more. Samuel was her husband. Elan nodded. "He tried to protect us. From Malcolm. Didn't work. And you've been running ever since from the cold." From hunger. From men with guns. Alon's voice hardened. From the law, too. Talon looked back at Clara, watching her chest rise and fall. I take it this Malcolm fella's not just a bad man, Talon said. He's got reach. Ellen's eyes burned with something beyond anger, old bone-deep betrayal. He owns people. Judges, sheriffs. He bought the paper in Billings just to print what he wanted. When Samuel said he wouldn't hand us over, Malcolm shot him, right in the back. Then he blamed her. Talon didn't speak. The truth hung in the air like smoke. He put a bounty on Clara. $50. Said she murdered her husband and kidnapped us. Ellen's voice cracked. Nobody questioned it. And why would they? Talon thought. A woman accused of killing her husband. A band of stray children. No land. No voice. No power. In the eyes of the territory, they were disposable. Clara stirred again, gasping. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. Elon, I'm here, the boy said, scrambling to her side. Clara blinked slowly, then winced as pain shot through her shoulder. She tried to sit up. Don't move, Talon said. You'll tear the stitches. She turned to him slowly, recognition dawning behind her fever. You're the man from the barn. Talon nodded once. You're in my cabin now, and you're lucky to be alive. Clara looked around, confused. Then her face tensed. The children. They're safe. Sleeping. She exhaled in relief, but it only lasted a second. He's coming, she said. He always finds us. Talon tilted his head. Malcolm, he doesn't stop. We change roads, hide in caves, sleep in wagons, and still he finds us. Her voice was hoarse, raw. Every time I think we've lost him, he finds us again, like the devil with a map to my soul. The room fell silent. You believe me? She asked after a beat. Talon met her eyes. I've seen the kind of men who don't stop. They don't believe in mercy. Just control. Clara nodded weakly, her whole body trembling. He wants the land, she said. Samuel inherited it. But it came with responsibilities, an oath to our tribe, to the children. Samuel honored it. Malcolm called it playing Indian games. He wanted the money, not the mouths. Aylin said Malcolm claimed the kids were his brother's property. Clara's lips tightened. He talks about them like livestock. Says he has a right to reclaim them. But they're not things. They're mine. Talon studied her. None of them are yours by blood, not one. Her voice cracked. I found Thomas in a churchyard starving. Emma's mother died giving birth in the middle of a wheat field. Marcus came from a mining camp after his father drank himself to death. They were all forgotten. But I didn't forget them. Her gaze locked on Talon's, steady now. I won't give them up. I didn't ask you to, he said simply. She watched him carefully, searching for judgment. She didn't find it. Outside, a branch cracked beneath the weight of snow. The wind shifted lower, now hissing instead of screaming. Clara flinched at the sound. You said he always finds you, Talon said. He follows rumors, she whispered. Buys them. Threatens people. The last family that helped us. They were burned out of their farm. Nobody else will take us in. Well, you're here now. She looked at him. And how long until you decide it's not worth it? He didn't flinch. You're bleeding in my home. I don't walk away from that. Clara's eyes filled with something raw. Not gratitude. Not yet. but maybe the beginning of trust. You don't even know what we've done. I know what he's doing. She slumped back against the furs, eyes closing again. You don't have to save us. Maybe I don't, Talon said, but I'm not going to watch you die trying to do it alone. They didn't speak after that. The fire dimmed, casting long shadows across the room. Talon stood and added a fresh log. He looked at Elon, who hadn't moved from Clara's side. You'll need to leave come morning, Elon said. He won't stop. If he thinks we're here, he'll come. Talon turned toward the window. Snow still fell gentler now, but the storm wasn't over. No, Talon said. Not yet. Elon frowned. Why Talon didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Clara asleep but still breathing. Then at the children curled like leaves near the fire. Then finally at the shadows moving across his walls, because something had shifted in him. The mountain had gone quiet, but the war had just begun. Outside, the sky began to lighten, not morning yet, but a sign. The wind carried something distant hooves against snow. Talon listened, jaw tight. In the quiet, Clara stirred again. Not from fever this time, but from instinct. Someone's coming, she whispered. And Talon didn't argue. The knock was soft, almost respectful. Talon didn't move. The second knock was louder, firmer. He stood from the table, his knife already in hand. Ellen flinched from his spot near the hearth, where he was peeling an old apple for the younger kids. Clara sat upright in the rocking chair, her arms still wrapped in bandages. Her color had returned some, though her body remained thin and taut like a bowstring. You expecting anyone? She asked, voice low. Talon gave her a look. You think I get visitors? The third knock wasn't a knock at all. It was a tap of something hard against wood. A signal. Familiar. Ancient. Talon sheathed his knife and moved to the door. He opened it slowly. An old woman stood in the snow, wrapped in elk hides, a carved staff in her hand, and a large satchel on her shoulder. Her black eyes studied him without a word. Her silver braids hung heavy over her chest, wet with melting snow. "Nana," he said with a nod. "You walked in this." She ignored the question. Her gaze drifted past him into the room and settled on Clara. "You brought them to me like wounded deer, so now ask yourself," she said. Her voice gravel and wind. "Do you want to see them walk again, or just stop bleeding?" Clara blinked, confused. The children sat still, unsure. "She's a medicine woman," Talon explained. "Shoshone elder. Lives 2 ridges south." Nana stepped inside without waiting for permission. She smelled of cedar smoke and wild mint, and her presence seemed to shrink the room. She walked to Clara, peered down at her with unreadable eyes, and lifted the edge of the bandage. Clara winced, but didn't pull away. Nana grunted. "Rot at the edge. Infection's shallow. He cleaned it well." "I tried," Talon muttered. "You're not a healer. You're a hunter. Still better than letting her die." "Barely." Nana turned her attention to Clara's face. "You've seen the other side." "I've felt it," Clara whispered. "Good. That's how we know where not to go next time." Nana began removing herbs from her satchel, dried roots bark, a small clay pot of pungent black paste. She ground them together with the end of her staff, then gestured to Talon. "Boil water. Keep it clean. And no firelight near this mix unless you want everyone tripping through memories." Clara chuckled weakly. "Is she always like this?" "She likes animals more than people," Talon said, filling the kettle. "But she'll save your life before most doctors." Nana said nothing. only worked. When she peeled back the bandage again, Clara gritted her teeth but didn't cry out. The paste sizzled when it hit the wound. Elan stepped forward. "What's that smell?" "Tree bark." "Mold," Fire Nana said without looking. "Same as any scar worth keeping." She finished wrapping the shoulder again and sat back on her heels. Her breath was shallow from the work. Clara reached out a hand. "Thank you. You're not healed yet. Still, thank you." The older woman finally nodded, a sign of respect passed between survivors. Later, after the children were fed and asleep, Nana sat near the hearth with Talon. Clara listened from her chair, quiet. "You brought them here," Nana said. "That means you claimed them." "I didn't claim anyone. Maybe not out loud. But the mountain listens." Talon said nothing. "You've been hiding since your wife passed," she continued. "That kind of silence makes a bat forget who he is. But now they're here and they're loud. They need time. Shelter. They need more than that," Nana said. "And so do you." She leaned close, her dark eyes sharp. "Don't wait until one of them dies to remember you were part of the world once." Talon looked at Clara, who held Elan's little sister asleep in her lap. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. When Nana left the next morning, Clara walked her to the edge of the tree line with Talon. Snow still blanketed the ground, but the sky was finally blue. "Why did you help us?" Clara asked. Nana looked at her like she'd asked whether the sun meant to rise. "Because the wind told me something was coming. And then he showed up at my door with 7 orphans and a woman leaking strength onto his floor." Clara smiled. "I thought you didn't like people." "I don't. But I like what they leave behind if it's something worth remembering." With that, Nana walked into the trees, her staff tapping against the frozen earth like a drumbeat fading into the woods. Back inside, Talon packed away the rest of her supplies. Clara stood by the window watching the kids as they played with carved wooden animals Talon had pulled from an old chest. "They're still children," she said. "What did you expect? I expected them to be broken." Her voice cracked. "But they laugh. After everything, they still laugh." Talon didn't answer. Clara turned to him. "Do you know what it's like to carry 7 lives on your back and still sleep with one eye open?" He nodded. "I do." She stepped closer. "Then you know why I can't keep running. You'll have to. If Malcolm finds you, he will find us. He always does. But this time," her voice trembled, "this time I want to fight." Talon raised an eyebrow. "With what army?" Clara smiled bitterly. "You." He almost laughed. Almost. But instead he looked at her long and steady. "You didn't find us by accident, Mr. Stonetree. You were meant to bury or save us." He didn't reply because deep down he wasn't sure which it would be. The next night a scout rode into Bear's Hollow. Dusty, shaking, half-frozen. Said he saw tracks in the crazy mountains. A cabin. Smoke from the chimney. Malcolm Rowe lit a cigar and smiled without humor. "Good," he said. "Let's pay them a visit." Back in the cabin, Talon stood at the window long after everyone had gone to sleep. He stared into the woods beyond, hand resting on his rifle. He didn't move until the wind shifted and carried with it the scent of horses. The mountain was quiet again, but it wouldn't stay that way. The morning came sharp and bright like a blade slicing through the frost. Snow still clung to the trees in thick coats, but the sun broke through for the first time in a week, casting long golden lines across the forest floor. Talon moved quietly through the clearing, loading his saddlebag. He didn't need to say anything. Clara had been watching him from the porch since dawn, arms crossed tight over her coat shoulder, still stiff with pain, but her eyes clear now, clearer than they'd been since she'd first opened them in his cabin. "Where are we going?" she asked as he cinched the straps. "To find help. I thought help came to us yesterday. Nana gave you time. Now I need someone who can give you distance." Clara stepped off the porch and onto the hard-crusted snow. The children were inside, still asleep, still safe for now. Aylin had insisted on standing guard again, and Talon hadn't argued. The boy was sharp and steady, and maybe most importantly, afraid. Fear made a better sentry than pride. Clara watched Talon check his rifle and swing it over his shoulder. "You're going alone best that way. If someone's watching the trails, one man's easier to lose in the trees. And who are you going to see?" He looked at her for a long beat. "An old ghost." She frowned. "You talk like riddles are part of the air up here." He smiled faintly. "Maybe they are." He started toward the trail, but Clara stepped forward and grabbed his arm, not harsh but firm. "You come back," she said. Talon looked down at her hand, then met her eyes. "I'll try." Then he vanished into the trees. The mountain swallowed him quickly, as it always did. The sun was nearly at its peak when Clara turned from the porch and walked back inside. She found Elan in the kitchen corner, crouched low, fitting fresh kindling into the stove. His movements were efficient, exact a grown man's work in a boy's body. "Did he say where he was going?" Elan asked. "No," Clara replied. "But he looked like it mattered." "It always does with him," Ellen muttered. She moved to the table where the children were still sleeping in a makeshift pile of blankets. Peter had curled himself under Clara's coat. Emma clung to Marcus's arm. The quiet felt heavy, not peaceful, like the pause before the next page turns the breath before the avalanche. Clara sat rubbing the stiffness from her shoulder. She thought of Nana, of her hands, her eyes, the certainty in her voice when she'd said, "You've taken them in, but are you prepared to keep them when hell returns?" She didn't have an answer. Talon didn't stop to rest. He cut across frozen creek beds, climbed through thickets, and passed under the shadow of tall, dead pines until he reached the foot of a narrow ridge. There, tucked into a cleft in the rock, was a lean-to covered in elk hides and pine boughs. Smoke drifted faint from a small fire pit. He stepped into view without drawing his rifle. A man emerged from the lean-to, taller than Talon, just as lean, with skin dark from sun and wind, and a thick beard streaked with gray. He wore snowshoes and a mountain lion pelt around his shoulders. His eyes were sharp, hard. "Wasn't sure you were still breathing," the man said. "Didn't come to catch up, Elias." Elias spat into the snow. "Figures." Talon moved closer, nodding toward the lean-to. "Still living on roots and smoke and the occasional whiskey," Elias said with a crooked grin. "But I'm guessing you didn't hike out here to ask about my diet. I need a way to move a woman and 7 children across the high ridge without drawing attention." Elias laughed, loud and sharp. "That's not a request, Talon. That's a damn miracle. I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm asking for a path." Elias sobered. "You mixed up in something." "Someone is," Talon said. "I just opened my door." Elias looked at him long and hard. "Funny thing. You open a door in the mountains, sometimes you let in the snow. Other times you let in fire." "She's both." Elias squinted. "What's her name, Clara?" He paused. "And Malcolm Rose, the devil sniffing at her trail. You know him only by reputation. Long reach, cold blood, buys men the way most folks buy coffee." Talon nodded. "He's coming." Elias turned and walked to a small pile of bundled maps and marked hides. He pulled one free, shook off the ice, and pointed. Here. There's a goat trail through Split Tooth Ridge, only passable for a few days once the ice softens. But if you time it right, you can reach the river bend without ever touching a main road. Is it safe? No. But it's quiet. And that's rarer. Talon folded the map, tucking it into his coat. Thanks. Elias eyed him. You're doing more than helping, Talon. You've got that look. What look? The one men wear when they stop living for themselves. Talon said nothing. Back at the cabin, the sun had dipped low. Clara had started teaching the children to boil water over the stove, basic small things. Elan was carving a piece of wood into the rough shape of a bird. Peter kept staring at the door. When's he coming back? The boy asked. Clara looked out the window. Soon. A moment later, as if conjured, the door opened. Talon stepped in, snow-dusted and quiet. The kids rushed to him like hounds to a scent, but he gently waved them back. We have a way out, he said. Clara stood. You found someone, I found a way through. How long? 3 days. Maybe 4. We'll need to travel light. No fire at night. No trail left behind. Then we go. Talon looked around the room. You sure you're ready? Clara didn't blink. We're not staying here to die. He nodded. I'll pack, she said. Talon turned toward the fire and for the first time let himself exhale. But the moment broke when Elan looked up sharply. Riders, he said. Everyone froze. Clara moved toward the window. Her face went pale. They've found us. Talon grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Clara put a hand on his arm. You said we had 3 days. His jaw tightened. Looks like we have until nightfall. Outside, hooves crushed the snow. A crow flew off the roof. And down the trail, Malcolm Rowe lit another cigar and whispered to his men, Let's smoke them out. Smoke them. The air in Bear's Hollow was sharper than usual that morning. The kind of sharp that cut more than just skin, it cut quiet. It cut peace. Snow had mostly melted off the dirt roads, leaving ruts and mud trails that stuck to boots like guilt. Inside the sheriff's office, the heat of the iron stove couldn't touch the chill that entered when the man in the black coat walked through the door. Malcolm Rowe didn't look like he belonged in a town like this. His coat was too clean, his gloves too soft. He moved like a man who thought every room he stepped into was already his. Sheriff Jed Hall looked up from his desk and set down his coffee slowly. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Didn't think you'd show up in person. I like to keep my investments close, Malcolm replied, his voice smooth as polished stone. Deputy Luke Carraway stood from his chair near the back hand, instinctively brushing against the butt of his revolver. Malcolm's eyes flicked toward the motion, then dismissed it. Relax, Deputy. I'm not here to stir trouble, just looking for someone. Hall leaned back in his chair. So I heard. Malcolm reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper stamped with a territorial seal and signed by a judge out of Helena. He tossed it onto the sheriff's desk. Warrant, he said. Legal and proper. For the apprehension of one Clara Whitestone, accused of murder, kidnapping, and child endangerment. Luke picked it up, skimmed it. This judge take bribes in silver or gold these days. Hall gave him a look. Luke didn't care. You think this town's got time to go chasing after a woman who probably just wants to stay warm and breathe in peace, the deputy said. Malcolm smiled without warmth. She doesn't just want peace. She wants to take what's not hers. Those children belong to me now by blood or by law, it doesn't matter. She stole them, and I intend to get them back. Hall raised an eyebrow. You intend to use a whole damn cavalry for one unarmed woman, and a few kids I intend to end a problem, Malcolm said, leveling his gaze, before it grows into something worse. Luke stepped forward, voice low but firm. The law ain't blind in Montana. It just squints real hard if you've got money. Malcolm turned slowly. You trying to provoke me, deputy? Luke said, stepping closer. I'm just wondering how much you paid for this paper, and if you think it buys you a conscience, too. The silence snapped tight as a wire. Then Hall stood breaking it. Enough, he said. The warrant's legal. Doesn't mean we have to like it, but we'll pass the word around. Malcolm adjusted his coat and nodded. I'll be staying at the Silver Spur. Send word when someone brings her in. He turned, tipped his hat with mock courtesy, and walked out. As the door shut behind him, Luke cursed under his breath. Hall leaned forward, voice quiet. We keep our heads down. Let the town whisper. Sooner or later, someone will talk. Luke's jaw tightened. Or she'll get killed before she ever sees a courtroom. Back in the Silver Spur saloon, Malcolm Rowe sat in a corner booth, cigar-lit fingers drumming on the table. His hired men flanked him, 3 of them grizzled types with blood in their teeth and too many scars to count. The barkeep brought him whiskey and a plate of stew. Malcolm didn't touch either. He waved a man over from the shadows, a scout named Brennan, fresh off the trail. Well, Natyakum asked. She's up in the crazy mountains, a day north of here. Cabin. Smoke from the chimney. Saw kids. All looked alive. Malcolm leaned back, finally satisfied. Then it's time. Brennan hesitated. You want them all alive? Malcolm looked at him like he'd asked whether the sky was blue. I want her brought in. The rest are negotiable. He stubbed out the cigar. You got till sundown. Back at the cabin, Talon was spreading out Elias's map across the table, tracing the ridgeline path with a steady finger. This is our window, he said. Split Tooth Ridge. We leave before first light. If we travel clean, stay off the open snow, we make it to the river in 3 days. Clara stood nearby, pulling clothes from a trunk. Blankets, canned goods. She moved with purpose, fear masked by determination. Marcus entered from the back room carrying a stack of rough-wrapped food. I packed what I could. Salted meat, bread, dried apples, good Talon said. Emma stood at the door watching the trail. They haven't come yet. They will, Talon replied. And then they did. A thunder of hooves in the distance. Sharp and sure. Clara froze. How many? Talon moved to the window. 3, maybe 4. Elan grabbed the rifle from the mantel and handed it to Talon without a word. Talon took it, cocked it, and glanced at Clara. Take the kids to the root cellar. Stay low. No lights. No sound. And you, I'll be the light they're drawn to. Clara's hand shook slightly as she herded the children toward the trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Talon opened the front door, slowly stepped out, and closed it behind him. The snow squeaked under his boots. Malcolm's men rode into view, rifles resting across their saddles. The one in front, Brennan pulled his horse to a stop. You, Talon Stone Tree. Talon didn't answer. We've got business with the woman inside. She's not inside. Don't play games, Mountain Man. The boss wants her alive. And if I say no, Brennan smiled, then you'll die trying to say it again. Talon raised his rifle. If you burn this cabin down, you better pray the fire reaches me before my bullets do. The moment hung in the air, thick with frost and tension. Then someone fired. Talon dove sideways behind the water trough as a bullet chipped the log wall behind him. He returned fire, dropping one of the riders clean off his horse. The others scrambled shots, flying wild. Inside the root cellar, Clara held Peter close, listening to every crack of gunfire like it was a countdown. Above, Talon took cover, reloaded, and aimed. Another shot, another man down. Brennan cursed, turned his horse, and fled down the trail. Talon didn't chase. He walked back to the cabin, blood in the snow rifle warm in his hands. Clara emerged a few minutes later, the children behind her. No one spoke. Talon met her eyes. "We leave before dawn." She nodded, her voice tight. "Then let's survive till then." That night, as the wind blew hard against the windows, Clara sat at the table sharpening a knife while Elan checked the rifle's chamber again. And down in Bear's Hollow, Malcolm Rowe poured himself another glass of bourbon. "Looks like they want to make this hard," he said, staring into the fire. He smiled. Good. The night was windless, but the trees still creaked. Snow had hardened into a thin crust over the forest floor, and every footfall echoed like bones breaking. The stars overhead blinked cold and far away, offering no comfort, no warmth, just distant reminders that the world was still spinning, even while theirs was standing on the edge of something sharp. They left before dawn as planned. Talon led the group down the narrow switchback that hugged the eastern edge of Split Tooth Ridge. The sky hadn't yet turned pink. The trail was barely wide enough for one person in places, the drop on one side steep enough to swallow you whole if your foot slipped. Clara brought up the rear, her shoulder bandaged tight beneath her coat, her eyes scanning behind them every few steps. Elan stayed close to the middle of the line, keeping the youngest children steady, especially Peter, who was still groggy from lack of sleep and had started mumbling in his dreams again. Talon paused after the first hour, motioning for them to crouch behind a stand of wind-worn pines. From this height, he could see the valley below. Smoke rose faintly from the direction of Bear's Hollow. Not cabin smoke, campfire smoke. Spread out. Too many to be from one place. "They're following us," Clara said, breath catching. Talon didn't look away. "No. They're trying to flank us. They know where we're going, no," he said, eyes narrowing. "But they know where they want us to go." The group pressed on in silence. Birds stayed quiet. Even the wind had the good sense to hold its breath. Clara moved next to Talon during the climb over a frozen creek bed. "We can't outrun them forever," she said. "I know. We need to stop running. I'm not running, I'm choosing the place we stop." She looked at him carefully. "You already have one in mind." He nodded. "There's a stone basin about a half-day out, natural walls, narrow entry. I've hunted elk there in the fall. If we make it, we can hold our ground." With what, he didn't answer. By midday, the sun had found its way above the trees, melting patches of snow into sludge. The children moved slower now. Marcus had started limping. Emma was shivering hard, her mittens soaked through. Clara wrapped her own scarf around the girl's hands and tightened it without a word. "Why are we stopping up there?" Elan asked Talon. "Why not just keep going?" Talon crouched beside a boulder and pulled out his compass. "Because we can't travel faster than them, but we can make it cost them to follow." Ellen frowned. "You mean fight?" Talon looked at him. "You've carried that pistol like a soldier, Ellen. Now you've got to decide if you're ready to use it like one." Elan didn't flinch. "I don't care if I have to shoot every last one of them." Talon put a hand on his shoulder. "Let's just make sure you don't have to shoot at all unless it's the last option." The boy nodded, but there was fire behind his eyes. By late afternoon, the trees thinned into a narrow pass. Beyond it, the stone basin appeared just as Talon had promised. Tall, jagged rock walls surrounded a wide, flat clearing, almost bowl-shaped. No high ground for an enemy, only one way in. Perfect for a last stand. They entered and set to work immediately. Talon showed Elan and Marcus how to create tripwire traps using pine branches and spare rope. Clara dug through the supplies and rationed food. She handed out jerky like it was gold. No fire, no noise, no mistakes. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and gray, Talon climbed one of the basin's lower ledges to scout. Then he saw it, a flicker in the distance, torchlight moving through the trees. 5, 6, maybe more. He climbed down fast. "They'll be here by dark," he said. 10 minutes, maybe less. Elan tightened his grip on the rifle. "Let's end this." Clara pulled her coat tighter. "Talon." He turned to her. Her eyes were calm, but her hands were shaking. "If I die tonight," she said, "promise me you'll get them out." He stared at her. "Don't talk like that." "I need to." "No," he said. "You don't get to throw your life away. You think I'm scared to die? I think you're scared to live long enough to lose them again." She looked away then, but not before he saw the truth hit her like a wave. The sound of branches snapping brought them back to the moment. Talon loaded his rifle. He crouched behind a boulder, Clara beside him with a knife in hand. Aylin lay belly down at the other side of the pass, gun raised, finger on the trigger. The others were hidden behind the rock wall in the hollow of the basin, silent as ghosts. Then Malcolm's voice rang out. Calm, clear, too close. "Let's not make this any worse than it has to be." Talon didn't move. "You've got something that belongs to me," Malcolm continued. "Give it back and I walk away. No blood," Funny Talon called out. "I don't remember lost souls being yours to claim." Malcolm chuckled. "That woman stole my property. She rescued children. She broke the law. She followed a better one." Malcolm's voice changed lower, now colder. "You hiding behind rocks, Talon. You always did prefer the backwoods over the front lines." Talon narrowed his eyes. "You know him," Clara whispered. "I did. A long time ago. Tell me later." They heard Malcolm's boot crunch first, then saw the shadows. 5 men stepped into the pass. Talon waited. Closer. Another step. Then now he said. Ellen pulled the wire. 2 men dropped to the ground with a scream, legs tangled, heads smacking against stone. Talon fired. Clara ducked and drove her knife into the thigh of the man who reached her. Gunfire echoed like thunder in the bowl. Elin dropped another clean between the eyes. Malcolm's men scattered, retreating into the trees. One dragged another who was bleeding from the gut. Then silence. No footsteps. No shouts. Only breathing. Talon stood slowly. Clara rose beside him, blood on her hands but eyes sharp. "They'll regroup," he said. "Then we'll be ready," she said. He looked at her. "You didn't hesitate." "I had too much to lose." He nodded. "That's the only reason that matters." That night they took turns keeping watch. The kids slept huddled and safe for the moment. Talon sat alone at the edge of the basin, rifle across his knees. A whisper of wind carried a sound he didn't like. Hooves. More were coming. And this time Malcolm wouldn't send just hired hands. He'd come himself. The basin was quiet, but Talon's bones told him the truth. He hadn't slept. None of them had not, really. They took shifts, sure Elan even managed to stay awake most of his, but sleep didn't come when the air around you felt like a coiled spring. And that morning, just before the sun breached the edge of the ridge, Talon heard what he'd been waiting for. Hooves. Not the staggered steps of hired guns moving sloppy. No, this was deliberate, controlled. Riders trained to move through the dark like wolves. He crouched near the mouth of the pass, rifle-ready eyes narrow. Clara crept up behind him. How many too many? Her jaw clenched. Malcolm Talon nodded once. He's not sending boys anymore. He's coming to end it himself. She looked back toward the hollow, where the children still slept, packed tight, in a tangle of coats and fear. "We don't have time to run," she said. "I know. We don't have enough bullets either." "I know that too." Clara looked at him, her voice low but steady. "Then what do we have?" Talon exhaled slowly. "We have the mountain, and we have something he doesn't." "What's that?" He looked her dead in the eye. Nothing left to lose. Malcolm Rowe adjusted his gloves as his horse trudged up the ridge path. His coat flared behind him like the edge of a storm cloud. 10 men rode with him this time, some ex-soldiers, some bounty hunters. All of them paid well. All of them eager to end what the last group couldn't. Brennan rode beside him, left arm wrapped in a blood-stained sling. "She's dug in," Brennan muttered. "They've got the basin tight. And yet you didn't finish the job." Brennan swallowed hard. "Talon's got the place rigged. Traps, tripwires, maybe even more guns than we thought." Malcolm didn't blink. "Then we clear them out the old-fashioned way, 1 inch at a time." He lit a cigar, the end glowing bright in the dawn. "Kill anyone who's not her." Back at the basin, Talon set to work fast. He pulled Clara aside. "There's a narrow crawl tunnel on the far end of the basin, goes through the rocks and comes out down by the frozen stream bed. You take the kids through it." "No, it's not a request. You said you're not running." "I'm not." "But you are. They need you." Clara grabbed his coat, eyes sharp. "They need you too." Talon hesitated. "Then softer, I know how to slow them down." "You don't." She stared at him, pain flickering behind her anger. "You said we had nothing left to lose." "That was a lie," he said. "We've got them." She wanted to argue, scream fight him. But instead, she nodded once, then turned and started waking the children. Elin stood near the rocks, rifle clutched tight, eyes hard. "I'm staying," he said. Talon looked at him. "You sure?" Ellen nodded. "I don't run anymore." Talon grabbed his shoulder. "Then you watch my left." Clara kissed Elan's forehead before vanishing into the trees with the others. Malcolm's men reached the pass at dawn. Talon was waiting, crouched behind stone. He fired first, dropping 1 man before the rest even raised their weapons. Gunfire cracked like lightning, echoed through the bowl. Elin fired next, his shot clean, deliberate. 2 men fell. The rest pressed forward, cautious now. 1 stepped on a wire. A branch swung from above and crushed his skull against rock. Malcolm, watching from the rear, narrowed his eyes. "Talon's smarter than this," he muttered. "Where's the woman?" Clara pushed through the crawl tunnel, holding Peter's hand tight. Marcus and Emma crawled ahead, eyes wide. The youngest twins whimpered with every scrape of stone, but they kept moving. The air grew colder as they neared the streambed. They made it out just as the sun rose over the trees. Smoke curled behind them. Gunfire still echoed. Clara looked back once, then pulled the children onward. Back in the basin, Talon and Elin fell back to the second position. Blood smeared the rocks. Empty shells littered the snow. Elan's hands shook as he reloaded. "They're still coming." Talon nodded. "Then we make every shot count." Another figure stepped into view, Malcolm himself. He walked into the basin like he was stepping into a church. Calm, measured, death in a black coat. Talon, he called. You never did learn to quit. Talon stood slowly, rifle pointed. You never gave me a reason to. Malcolm smiled. Where is she gone? Malcolm didn't blink. You lie worse than you shoot. Try me. Malcolm raised a hand. His men spread out. Elin fired. Another one dropped. But a bullet ripped through Talon's shoulder, knocking him back. He grunted, rolled behind the rock, and kept firing with his offhand. Elan screamed, Talon, I'm fine. Talon lied. Malcolm advanced slowly. Then a horn. Distant, sharp, familiar. A Shoshone war horn. Malcolm froze. From the tree line, 5 riders broke through Nana, leading them, Elias right behind her rifle blazing. Malcolm's men scattered under the sudden assault. Talon rose, bleeding but steady. Elin handed him a fresh magazine. Together they pushed forward. Malcolm turned his horse and fled. It was over in less than 10 minutes. Nana dismounted and walked to Talon, who was pale, his coat soaked red. You stubborn old tree, she muttered. Didn't I tell you not to make yourself into a martyr? Talon coughed. Didn't stick. Clara returned not long after, breathless, eyes wide. She ran to him and dropped to her knees. You came back, he rasped. I always come back. She pressed her forehead to his. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. By sunset, Malcolm was gone. His men scattered, and the basin was quiet again. But Clara knew it wouldn't last. She sat beside Talon that night as he drifted into sleep, fever beginning to take root. She held his hand and whispered, We won this fight, but the war's not done yet. Down in Bears Hollow, a telegram arrived at the sheriff's office. 1 line. Clara Whitestone spotted, armed, survived Crazy Basin, and it was signed with an emblem that wasn't Rose. Someone else was watching now. Someone worse. The telegram hit Sheriff Hall's desk like a curse. He stared at it in silence, the single line scrawled in tight military script. Clara Whitestone spotted, armed, survived Crazy Basin. Below it, a small seal was pressed into the bottom corner, not the Rowe family emblem, but something colder, cleaner, government issue. Deputy Luke Carraway read it over his shoulder, brow furrowing. That's not from Malcolm. No, Hall muttered. This one's worse. Luke looked closer. U.S. Marshals Service Hire, Hall said. Justice Department. Eastern Territories. Luke leaned back slowly. They sending someone, no, Hall said, jaw tight. They're already here. 3 days after the battle at the basin, Clara stood on the porch of a small log cabin tucked deep into the fir woods below Dry Creek Ridge. Elias had guided them here after the fight, helping Talon back across the hills in a crude sled. The cabin was a safe house, old, hidden. Only the Shoshone and a few retired mountain men knew it even existed. Inside, Talon lay asleep on a straw cot, his shoulder wrapped in thick layers of salve-soaked cloth. Nana checked his fever each morning with a palm to his head and a string of whispered prayers in her native tongue. He hadn't woken in 2 days. Clara stood guard like a wolf. Her hands never left her knife or the rifle leaning against the door. When Elias returned from a scout run, she met him at the tree line. You were gone too long, she said. He unslung his pack and set it down. Had to circle the ridge twice. Someone's tracking again. Different set of boots this time. Rose. Elias shook his head. Too clean. Too quiet. Like military types. Federal, maybe. Clara's face hardened. Why would the feds be out here? Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed her a folded scrap of newspaper. Found this pinned to the back wall of the Silver Spur Saloon. She opened it. The ink was smudged but legible. Wanted Clara Whitestone. Charges include abduction assault, obstruction of federal order. Subject is armed and considered dangerous. May be in the company of minors and a known fugitive named Talon Stonetree. Clara let the paper flutter in the wind before crumpling it in her fist. He said it wouldn't stop with him, she muttered. Elias looked back toward the cabin. Talon. He told me once, you kill a man like Malcolm Rowe, you'd better hope he dies with no friends. Elias nodded slowly. Looks like Malcolm had plenty. Back inside, Nana replaced the cloth on Talon's forehead, with a fresh one muttering as she worked. Clara sat by the fire blade in her lap, eyes on the flames. The children were asleep in the loft above Elan, the last to drift off, still clutching the old rifle tight across his chest, like it might carry him through his dreams. Is he going to wake up? Clara asked. Nana didn't look up. His body is fighting, but his spirits wandered. What do you mean he's halfway between this world and another? You want him back, you speak his name. Every day, loud. Make him remember what he's not done with. Clara swallowed hard. He saved us. Nana finally turned to her. Then now you save him. That night, Clara stood outside alone. Stars stretched like scars across the sky. She whispered his name once into the dark. Just once. Then again louder. Talon. The wind didn't answer, but something in her chest settled. She turned back toward the cabin, then froze. A flicker of movement near the edge of the woods. She crouched low, drawing her knife and rifle in the same motion. Her breath slowed. Focus tightened. Another step. A silhouette between two trees. She clicked off the safety and waited. The man stepped forward, hands raised, coat open, no weapon drawn. He was young, late 20s, maybe face clean-shaven hair, too neat for someone who'd lived in the woods. Don't shoot, he said calmly. Clara didn't lower the gun. You're not from around here. No, ma'am. I'm Agent Thomas Wren, U.S. Department of Justice. That's supposed to mean something out here. It means I'm not Roe. And I'm not here to kill you. Just take me in then, Wren smiled faintly. If I were here to arrest you, I wouldn't have come alone. Clara's eyes narrowed. So what do you want? He took a slow step forward. I want the truth, and maybe to help you stay alive long enough to tell it. She scoffed. People like you don't help women like me. I'm not like them, he said more firmly now. I know what Roe was, and I know how many judges and marshals he bought. Then why are you here? Because Roe had friends, and those friends don't like unfinished business. They'll come harder next time, louder, and when they do, you won't have the rocks to hide behind. Clara looked past him toward the forest. And Talon, she asked. Wren hesitated. If he wakes, he'll have to choose. Fight with you, or run. Clara stepped closer, rifle still in hand. He doesn't run. Wren nodded once. Then neither should you. After Wren left, disappearing into the trees with barely a sound, Clara returned to Talon's side. She took his hand. His skin was hot, but his fingers curled faintly around hers. She leaned down, her voice strong now, grounded. They're coming again. Different name, same war. You hear me, Talon, we're not done yet. You said we had something worth fighting for. Now you prove it. Silence. Then a breath. Deeper than before. Stronger. His eyes fluttered open. She gasped, grabbing him tighter. "You're back," she whispered. He blinked. Was I gone long enough? He tried to sit up, winced, then relaxed. Malcolm gone. And the kids safe. His voice cracked. Then what's next? She looked out the window toward the dark. They're sending something worse. He nodded weakly. Then we stand, he said. One more time. In Bears Hollow, Agent Wren walked into the old telegraph office and sent a single line. They're alive. And ready. He signed it, not with a name, but with a code only the Bureau's black files knew. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain, not snow this time, sharp, cold, and relentless. It battered the roof of the safe house cabin, drumming against the windows like distant gunfire. Lightning cracked across the sky in jagged white forks, briefly lighting the woods in bursts of ghostly blue. Talon sat up in bed for the first time in nearly 4 days. His shoulder still burned like fire lived beneath the bandages, but his mind was clear now. No more fever, no more dreams. Just pain and the weight of what he remembered. Clara sat across from him, sharpening her knife by lantern light. She looked up when he stirred. "You're awake," she said quietly. "I heard thunder. You heard war knocking." He exhaled, leaning forward with a grunt. Clara stood, walked over, and crouched in front of him. "You shouldn't be up yet. I don't think the people coming for us are waiting for me to feel better." She gave a dry smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, they're not." Talon studied her. Her face looked harder, leaner, like whatever softness she once carried had been burned away by the last few days. "Something changed," he said. She didn't answer right away. "Then his name's Wren. Justice Department. He found us." Talon's jaw tightened. "And you let him walk away? He wasn't here to arrest us. He warned us. Said the next wave coming won't be bounty hunters. It'll be government. Official and quiet. And final." Talon nodded slowly. "He's right." She blinked. "You knew I've seen men like Roe before. When they fall, they always drag someone worse out from the shadows." He swung his legs over the edge of the cot, and she moved to help him stand. He winced, teeth gritted, but made it up. Clara held him steady. "They think we're cornered," she said. Talon's eyes narrowed. "Then let's make cornered hurt." The next morning, Talon gathered everyone in the clearing behind the cabin. Alon stood with his rifle slung across his back, face calm but sharp. Elias leaned against a pine tree, arms crossed, chewing a strip of jerky. Nana stood beside the children, her eyes full of something ancient and unshaken. Clara faced them all with her arms folded. Talon stepped forward. His voice was gravel and steel. "We've got 3 days, maybe less." Wren wasn't guessing. "They'll come hard. They'll come legal. But they won't care about justice." He looked at Elan. "You still want to fight?" Elan nodded without hesitation. "If I run now, I'll never stop running." Talon turned to Elias. "You said you were done with war." Elias grunted. "This ain't war. This is pest control." A ghost of a smile passed Talon's face. Then he looked at Clara. "You sure about this?" She didn't flinch. "I'm done letting other people write the end of my story." Talon nodded. "Then we turn this mountain into our message." The next 2 days blurred into motion. Talon and Elias mapped the valley below Dry Creek Ridge, marking every choke point, every natural funnel, every rock they could turn into a shield. Elan and Marcus worked traps, setting up deadfalls and tripwires with Elias's help. Clara trained the children not to fight, but to move, to stay silent, to hide when told. She drilled them without raising her voice. Not once. Nana prepared poultices, loaded packs with water-food medicine. Her calm kept them all steady. On the second night, Ren returned. He stepped out of the trees, arms raised. "You've been busy," he said. Talon didn't lower his rifle. "Why are you here?" Ren didn't blink. "To offer a choice." Clara stepped forward. "We're listening. There's a safe line out through Bitterroot Pass. If you leave by tomorrow night, I can stall the order long enough to keep your names off any official file." Talon stared at him. "You trying to be a savior agent?" "I'm trying to keep children from dying." Elan stepped forward, eyes hard. "And what about us?" Ren looked at the boy, then Clara, then Talon. "You're ghosts already. They just haven't buried you yet." Silence settled like fog. Talon finally spoke. "If we leave, we vanish forever." Ren nodded. "That's the price of surviving." Talon glanced at Clara. Her jaw clenched. "And if we stay," Ren hesitated, "then you better make them bleed so hard no one forgets why you stood your ground." The next morning, Clara stood at the edge of the creek bed as the fog rolled in. She thought about what Ren had said. "You're ghosts already." Maybe they were. Maybe that was the only way to survive anymore, by becoming legend rumor whispers in the dark. But she looked back at the cabin. Saw Peter helping Emma hang blankets over the windows. Saw Elan carving more arrowheads. Saw Talon standing again upright despite the pain, and she knew. They weren't ghosts. They were still here. Still fighting. Still real. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Later that evening, Talon stood with Clara on the bluff above the creek. They watched the sun dip low, the horizon bleeding orange into the trees. "They'll come tomorrow," he said. "I know. You still have time to take the kids and run." "I'm not running." Talon looked at her. "Then we fight like people who don't expect to make it." She nodded. "That's the only way I've ever fought." He stared at her, really saw her. The fire in her. The weight. The choice, the question. Then he said the words he hadn't dared speak before. "If I fall tomorrow, you keep them safe." "I will, no matter what it takes." She turned to him, eyes fierce. "No matter what it takes," she repeated. And they stood together, shadows stretched long behind them, ready for what would come. Far down the mountain, at the edge of the next county line, a convoy of 6 black-coated riders crossed a frozen riverbed. Their leader carried no badge, no name, just a sealed order from Washington, and a list of names burned into his mind. At the top of the list, Clara Whitestone, Talon Stonetree. His orders were simple: wipe them off the map. The men in black didn't speak as they rode. 6 in total. Coats waxed and glistening under the mist. Their horses moved in perfect sync, hooves muffled by the wet earth and layers of pine needles. No trail markers, no campfires, no wasted motion. They didn't come for negotiation. They came to erase a problem. Leading them was a man no one called by name. His orders were printed, not spoken. His badge wasn't sewn, but hidden in a lockbox with one phrase etched in brass: Directive Sigma 4. He carried no rifle, only a revolver he'd never had to draw twice. At the base of Dry Creek Ridge, he stopped his horse and looked up the slope. "She's here," he said flatly. The man behind him, older and gaunt, spoke for the first time. "There's no path, not one they'd risk twice. They've made a path, the leader replied. They want to be found. And then, as if on cue, a shot rang out from the ridge. Clean, crisp, not meant to kill, but to say, "We see you." The leader didn't flinch. "Fan out," he ordered. "Burn everything behind you." Atop the ridge, Talon lowered his rifle. "They're here," he said. Clara looked through the spyglass Elias had recovered from the trapline. How many? 6. No horses branded. Gears standard federal. Quiet. Fast. Elan stood behind them, checking the sights on his rifle for the 3rd time. "This isn't like before." No, Talon agreed. "This is war now." Elias stepped out from the trees, loading slugs into a double barrel. "You think they'll flank? They'll try," Clara said, "but not before testing the front." Talon glanced at her. "That's when we hurt them." She nodded. "Bad enough they remember." He stepped closer, his voice low and grave. "This is the last stand." She held his gaze. "Then we make it loud." The ridge was a fortress. Trees had been felled across the slope to make barricades. Pits dug along the switchback. Stones stacked into blinds. The trap lines had been doubled, and escape routes marked with pine flower and colored string. Clara moved the children into the lower cavern behind the root cellar, narrow, damp, but safe. Nana stayed with them, whispering songs in a language older than the hills. At sunset, the wind shifted, cold, metallic, like breath before blood. Talon stood with Elan at the eastern bluff, scanning for movement. Elan's voice cracked the silence. "I'm not scared to die, but I am scared to watch it happen." Talon looked at him. "You won't. Not today." "How do you know?" "Because today, Talon said we fight like they forgot we could." The Blackcoats moved at twilight. Not clumsy like Rose men. No shouting. No taunts. Just silence and death in matching coats. The first trap snapped shut on a scout's leg. His scream cut through the trees and then stopped short. The leader didn't even pause. They reached the first barricade by nightfall, burned through it, with oil-soaked wicks clearing the path like ghosts passing through a wall. Then came the voice echoing from the trees. "You've crossed into land that buries men." It was Clara. From the ridge above, she stood tall behind a wall of rock, rifle resting across her arm. Her voice rolled like thunder down the slope. "We warned you. You didn't listen." The leader stepped into view, looked up at her, and for the first time he spoke loud enough to echo back. "Your warning was noted. So is your burial site." He raised a hand. Shots fired. Talon grabbed Clara, pulling her down as bullets whined off stone. Elin returned fire, dropping one Blackcoat with a clean shot to the chest. 3 left, Elias said from the western trail. "They're circling the creek bed." Talon nodded. "Take the long flank. Push them into the gully." Elias disappeared into the trees. Back at the ridge, the leader and 2 remaining agents pushed forward under cover of smoke grenades. A thick, choking haze rolled up the slope, muting the moonlight. Clara coughed, ducking behind the barricade. "They've trained for this." "So did we," Talon growled. He rolled to the edge and fired twice, hitting one agent square in the throat. The body tumbled backward down the slope. The smoke shifted. Then the unmistakable snap of a branch. Too close. Clara turned just in time to see the leader crest the wall. They met eyes. She pulled the trigger empty. He raised his revolver. Before he could fire, Elan screamed from behind, "Hey!" The boy shot wide, but it was enough to make the leader turn. Clara lunged, driving her knife straight into his side. He staggered, shocked, but didn't fall. She pulled back, then stabbed again. And again. He finally dropped, gun clattering beside him. She stood over the body chest, heaving. Ilan ran to her side. "You okay? I don't know." They looked down at the man. His face had no emotion. Even in death, he looked neutral, like he'd never existed at all. Clara knelt beside him, pulling a small metal emblem from his coat pocket. A federal seal, but altered, coded, marked for secrecy. "This wasn't law," she said softly. "This was cleanup." At dawn, Talon walked the perimeter. Elias returned from the trees, bruised but grinning. "Last one ran like hell when I lit the brush fire." Talon nodded. "That's all we needed." Inside the cabin, the children began to stir. Nana cooked quietly, as if the world hadn't just tilted. Clara came to stand beside Talon. "We won," she said. "No," he replied. "We survived. Winning doesn't happen till no one else comes." She looked out over the burned ridge, her voice steady. "Then let's give them nothing else to come for." Far to the east, in a darkened rail car rolling toward Washington, a man in a gray suit read a file labeled Operation Whitestone. He closed it, lit a cigarette, and wrote one word on a blank sheet of paper: disavow. The cabin felt different. Not quiet. Not peaceful. Just different. Like the air had thinned and everyone was holding their breath without realizing it. 3 days had passed since the attack on Dry Creek Ridge. 3 days since Clara killed the man with no name. Since Talon whispered to Elan in the dark that some wars don't end when the shooting stops, they just go underground. Nana moved slowly that morning, stirring a pot of broth over the fire while murmuring to herself in Shoshone. The children were quieter too. Even Peter, who usually laughed in his sleep, hadn't made a sound in 2 nights. Outside, snow began to fall again. Light, gentle, the kind that looked beautiful if you didn't know what came before it. Inside, Talon sat near the hearth, cleaning his rifle with one good hand. His shoulder still ached like hell, but the fever was gone. He was back, at least on the surface. Clara stood near the window watching the tree line. She hadn't spoken much since the fight. Talon glanced at her. "They're not coming back," he said. She didn't answer. "You don't have to keep watching." Still nothing. He set the rifle down and pushed himself up, slow and stiff. "You think it's over?" she finally asked, her voice low. "I think we made it through something no one expected us to survive." She turned. "That's not the same as being safe." Talon nodded. "No, it's not." She walked across the room and sat across from him. "There's something else," she said. He tilted his head. "Go on." "When I searched that man before we burned the bodies, I found a second file, hidden in his coat lining." She pulled a folded page from her jacket and handed it to him. Talon opened it. Black ink on cream paper. Government issue. But not a warrant. Not a report. A letter. Short. Cold. Authorization to terminate Operation Whitestone. All assets deemed expendable. No public record. Immediate disavowal upon completion. It was signed not by a marshal, not by a sheriff, but by a man in Washington whose name had been redacted, stamped over in thick black ink. Talon's throat went dry. "They didn't come to capture us," he said. "They came to erase us." He stood pacing slowly, anger building beneath his calm. "They're tying off loose ends," he muttered. "No trial, no witnesses, just ghosts." Clara stared into the fire. "And if they think we're dead already," Talon paused, then looked at her. You want to vanish, I want to decide how this ends, she said. Not them. Later that night they gathered everyone in the main room. Firelight flickered across faces worn thin by fear and frostbite. Ellen sat near the wall, rubbing oil into his rifle. Elias leaned back against a stack of crates, listening. Nana stirred the pot again, same motion, same hum. Clara stood in the center. This place isn't safe anymore. Not because it's weak, but because it's strong. We held them off, and now we're marked. She looked around the room, one face at a time. We have a choice. We can keep running, try to outrun a government that's already decided we don't exist. Or we can make ourselves undeniable. Talon stepped beside her. We tell the truth, he said. To the right people. Loud enough. Wide enough. Elias frowned. You think there's anyone left to listen? Not in these woods, Talon replied. But east of here. Chicago. St. Louis. Maybe even D.C. Clara added, we've got names, documents, evidence. If we vanish, they bury the truth. But if we go public, anyone might dig. The room went still. Then Elin spoke up. If we stay here, we survive. But if we go, maybe someone else doesn't have to go through this. He looked at the twins curled in blankets beside Nana. I think that's worth it. Clara nodded. It is. They spent the next day preparing. Nana made bundles of dried meat salves, herbs. Elias mapped routes, south paths that passed through mining towns, stage lines, and railroad junctions. Talon recovered faster than he should have. Anger had that effect sometimes. Clara stayed focused, organizing supplies, making sure the kids knew how to move, how to pack, how to disappear if they had to. At sunset, Talon walked into the forest alone. He stood beneath the tree where he'd buried the first of Roe's men weeks ago. The snow had covered the mound, now hiding the blood the past, but not the memory. He knelt down and whispered, You tried to break us, but you only made us louder. That night, Clara handed Talon the revolver she took from the federal agent. You sure, she asked. He turned it in his hand. This gun was meant to end me. Now it's yours. He holstered it. Then let's write a different ending. In the morning, they left the cabin behind. No notes, no fire, no sign of where they were headed. The children walked in pairs. Aylin stayed near the front. Elias took the rear. Clara and Talon walked side by side in the middle, watching the tree line. At the edge of the ridge, Clara paused. She looked back at the cabin one last time. I was never supposed to survive this long, she said. Talon looked at her. That's the problem with people like us. She raised a brow. What? We don't stay dead. In Washington, a young clerk delivered a sealed envelope to a desk marked Office of Internal Affairs. Inside the envelope were photographs, handwritten pages, witness names, locations. Attached to the front was a single phrase, The dead are talking. The train pulled into Chicago just after midnight. Steam hissed and coiled through the air as the engine slowed to a halt. The platform was nearly empty, just a few drunk men staggering out of the saloon across the street, and a young newsboy asleep on his pile of papers. Talon stepped off first, his boots hitting the wooden boards with a soft thud. He winced a little, the wound still stiff, but he walked steady. Behind him, Clara descended, carrying Emma on one hip. Elias and Elan followed, guiding the rest of the children with quiet precision. Nana brought up the rear, her shawl pulled tight against the cold wind. They didn't speak. Not yet. They were in the city now. A world of gas lamps and factory smoke, of carriages and strange eyes that looked through you without seeing anything at all. Talon waited at the edge of the platform while everyone stepped down. Clara came to his side and looked out over the skyline, rows of buildings standing tall against the darkness like teeth. "This is the loudest place I've ever been," she murmured. Talon nodded. "Good. Maybe now someone will hear us." By morning, they found rooms in a small boarding house on the edge of the industrial district. The owner, a black woman named Hattie, who lost 2 sons to Pinkerton bullets, didn't ask questions. She gave them hot water, warm food, and a place to breathe. In the days that followed, they moved carefully. Talon met with an old friend, a retired war journalist named William Larrabee, a man who once wrote about Bleeding Kansas and the Apache Wars, but had long since buried his pen under a pile of unpaid bills. Clara gave him the file, the documents, the names. He didn't speak as he read, just poured whiskey into coffee and turned each page like it might cut him. When he was done, he looked up at her. "If half of this is true, it's all true," she said. He tapped the page. "You realize if I print this, you'll never be safe again. We were never safe to begin with." He leaned back. "Then let's make them sweat." 3 weeks later, the first story ran. Erased, how the government tried to silence Clara Whitestone. It hit the front page of the Chicago Herald. Within 2 days, the New York Tribune picked it up. Then the Boston Voice. Then London. Details came out how the Rowe family owned judges, how federal agents operated under sealed directives, how Operation Whitestone wasn't an isolated incident. People started asking questions, loud ones. A congressional inquiry was launched. Anonymous sources from within the department leaked confirmation that a rogue division had been terminated. And yet, no names were named. Not officially. Because the government wasn't interested in justice. They were interested in distance. They needed someone to blame. They needed a body. So they gave the world one. A charred corpse found near the edge of the Mississippi. Unrecognizable. Dressed in black. A forged badge planted on the chest. Labeled Agent Wren. Case closed. No further investigation. Back to business as usual. But the people weren't done listening. Clara and Talon kept moving. Not hiding, but traveling. Speaking. Quietly. In back rooms. In train cars. In farms and schoolhouses and union halls. They never stood in front of cameras. They never used their real names. But their story traveled. Like a spark in dry grass. Ellen grew tall, strong. He learned to teach, not just fight. He taught children in mining towns how to read, and he taught women how to shoot. He wore Talon's old hat and never once complained about the weight. Elias disappeared again like smoke. Some say he went north, some say south. But every now and then, a corrupt marshal would vanish in the night, and folks whispered a name that never stuck. Nana returned to her people. She didn't say goodbye only, "You've got your own spirits to watch now." And she walked back into the trees, barefoot in the snow. The children grew. They took new names, new homes, but they never forgot the mountain. And they never forgot the woman who fought to keep them alive. One spring morning, Talon and Clara sat on a porch overlooking the Missouri River. He had more gray in his beard now. Her eyes had more lines at the corners, the kind that only came from smiling after grief. They watched the sun rise through a thin mist. "You ever think we'd make it here?" he asked. Clara sipped her coffee. "No, but here we are." "Still breathing," she said. He looked at her, his voice quiet. "They tried to erase us." She smiled. "Then we should have been harder to forget." The world didn't change overnight. The powerful stayed powerful. The guilty stayed free. But a few people read the stories, and a few more remembered the names, and some of them did better. That was enough. That was how it started. Because the truth doesn't need a parade, it just needs a fire, and someone to carry it forward. So if you ever hear a story about a woman with eyes like stormlight and a knife she never missed with, or a mountain man with a limp and a stare that could freeze bullets, if you hear whispers about kids who survived a war they didn't start, if you read an old article yellowed and torn about justice that almost wasn't, just know they were real, and they chose not to die quiet. Because some people aren't meant to vanish. Some people are meant to be remembered.